Anyway, to make a long story short, I just want to say, I assume as I was asked to join, not because of myself, not because of Mendel Duchman. First of all, it's not about fundraising. It's not about helping shluchim. It's not a, it's a ruchnis that can help, but it's not a gashmis that can help. So I assumed that I was asked to join here for simply for my father, Rabbi Yisroel Halevi, who probably, if you ask anyone around the world who's a shliach that's identified with the Rebbe on Simchas Torah, was I had the schus to be a son. My entire tata, Olav Sholem, Rabbi Yisroel ben Rab Shneur Zalman Halevi, who incidentally lived the whole year for Simchas Torah. And I want to share that with you first as a son and more on a personal level, and then move it into a Klolisha Inyan, okay? So I was probably asked because my father had a tremendous chus to be very, very close to the Rebbe. He's been described in many, many letters and igris and things like that, going back to Zayda Zalman, that my father had a father-son relationship. But we knew in the house that whenever Simchas Torah was coming, that we got to get out of the way. We just got to sit, we got to listen, we got to shake our heads, whatever my father says we got to do. We would help him with his geschäft. We stayed out of his way because there's holy stuff coming down. There's no question about it. And I think it's not only me, we even saw my mother, because when the Rebbe, my mother, Allah Shalom, whose Yotzeit is going to be in a month, also practiced that, because my father wouldn't go into 770 without his bottle of mashka. He always went with 2 pans of homemade cake, and he would make sure to tell the Rebbe, so even my mother was part of the Simchas Torah shlichus, and in a way she also stayed out of the way, so she should have the schus to be able to bake these cakes for when the Rebbe walked in 770. When my father walked into 770. And basically everybody knows that my father davened Shachris. After Shachris, he was motioned to, I don't remember exactly, I think he took it over from Rabbi Kazanovsky. The previous history, I don't know. But my father was honored to make Kiddush, and he would make Kiddush for the klal, and then he would have the mezainis, and then the Rebbe would tell him to make sure to give l'chaims to everybody. And my father stood there and gave out l'chaims, and of course, probably one for you and one for me, because he knew who he's going to be talking to, so he was well prepared. But one of the earlier stories that were told, just to correct the points, it happened with my father. The Rebbe said you should give l'chaims to everybody, and then he said that you give one to the doctor, to the doctor. What's his name? Resnick. Did you give a l'chaim to Dr. Resnick? So my father said, and you have to understand the milieu, you have to understand the environment. My father spoke only in Russian. They were face to face, the Rebbe and my father. They would talk. My father would prepare the Russian sayings, the jokes. If you looked at the Rebbe, because my father was facing the Rebbe, you'd see that the Rebbe was constantly laughing and smiling. And they were really, because my father had developed old stories from Chassidim and different things. So my father was facing the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, did you give to the doctor? So my father said to them, Yukul, let's put the story in straight here. To them, Yukul. So the Rebbe said, aren't you his patient? So my father said, yes. Didn't you go to see him last week? Yes. He says, did you write him a check? Yes. So who's the Yukul? You and him. So I remember my father saying about the story that he felt a little bad, but the main thing is he got to have another l'chaim together with Dr. Resnick. But I think that what we need to understand here, which I think everybody spoke about, and there's nothing really to add. I mean, every so often I'm sitting here with our children. Today we have the inspiration to give over to our children to carry. So sometimes Yutas Kislev and Yud Shvat and all the different important days, I think to myself, I wasn't there. What was it like? Okay. And then I find myself, when we talk about Hey Tavis, and when we talk about Simchas Torah, and when we talk about Pesach, we lived it. Maybe it was smaller, maybe it was different, but it was mamish happening, and we were totally focused on what was going on. So when it came to Simchas Torah, like I said earlier, my father would have different discussions, and I want to bring a couple of small stories that I remember after Yontif, when I used to call him. The first few years I was there as well. Then I moved out on Shlichus to Irvine, California. And the second Shabbos Yontif was over, everybody gathered around the telephone. What was this year's story? So I remember one year the Rebbe said openly my father had a conversation with the Rebbe, and he said, listen, I don't know what to do, but last night by the Seudah, I took a little l'chaim, and my wife asked me not to take a l'chaim, not too much, because there's a lot of guests by the table. Maybe they'll get a different impression, was soll ich tun? He asked them, was soll ich tun? The Rebbe says you shouldn't stop. It's a time to say l'chaim. Du sollst nicht spoil werden von sie. Sie sollen nicht spoil werden von dir. And you continue to do it. So I think that in the next 2 days that, it is definitely the Rebbe's tag, but we know those who were there and those who even ran Chabad houses and run Chabad houses. It's a tkufa. It's not talking philosophy. You don't have to fight your fear. You don't have to think what to say to a balabas. You just got to pick up your feet. You just got to be besimcha, and you got to bring joy. The way, I think Alter said, closing our eyes and seeing will as if we're imagining the Rebbe himself. I want to just say 2 more stories that I've prepared. First of all, l'chaim. One story is that 3 years before my father passed away, he came to me for Sukkot. I mean, now, Baruch Hashem, a lot of Hasidim parents are very proud of their kids who are shluchim, and they come and spend Yontif. So one year I asked my father to come and see the shlichus. He said, no problem, but Motzah Sukkot, the first flight, I got to get out of there. I don't want to get stuck with Chalamoid and with Simchas Torah. Like the world would come to an end if he didn't spend Simchas Torah by the Rebbe. The Rebbe should geholfen. He came to me to Irvine for the first days. And during the first days, he got a roise on his foot. How do you say roise? Whatever it is. He got a roise on his foot. And if I can tell you, it's like chas v'sholem, somebody Nebuch passed away. He right away, he says, Mendel, take me to every doctor, take me here, take me there. I can't even think that I won't be by the Rebbe on Simchas Torah. And I remember, I know there's a lot of stories about the Rebbe, but I remember what my father instilled to me, that he, who's my father, and Rab Zalman's Chassid, and Matchayael, and the back, like, so you'll miss one Simchas Torah. Was wird schon sein? But it is gegangen in Leben. In fact, I took him to one doctor, I'll never forget, till the last day he was living. He always reminded me of the story. I said, I have a Bala boss. He's the best in the world. He's going to take care of you. We make an appointment. We drive down to Newport Beach. We come into the doctor. He pulls up his where the rise is, and all of a sudden the doctor says, "I'm really sorry. I'm a podiatrist. I only specialize from the ankle down. Everything above the ankle is nicht meine business." And if I have to tell you, my father's face turned white. And I was literally waiting for him to tell the doctor, I'll soon give you, because he thought it was a solution. Anyway, the Rebbe should geholfen, of course, with many, many medicines and doctors. He came back, and that instilled in me and my children, and now my children are instilling it into the grandchildren. Simchas Torah on dem Rebbe, wie ist das möglich? Now there's a Closeness Simchas Torah and there's a Prati Simchas Torah. I firmly believe, and I'm sure if you would ask my brother Shalom or Yossi or Baruch or anyone, I believe that besides for the Closeness Simchas Torah, my father looked at it like a Protesdike, where he would get his chizuk and he would be able to move on. And as they say in America, my dear friends, Taira Shluchim, validation is very important, and it's becoming more important every day. It used to be that validation you get when you went to a parking lot. But today, with the podcasts and the influencers, Chassidim, not Chassidim, alle seinen Größe Deisogers, but validation is very, very important. Okay? But we know what really validation is. And I think that the Rebbe gave my father the final validation. And almost everyone knows the story, but the year he passed away in Tovshin Mem Tes, he was standing in front of the Rebbe. And by the way, every time the Rebbe saw my father, Duchman, no, what's the word I'm looking for? Not with L'chaim. Oh. Yeah, still, the Rebbe would. Yeah, he would tell him right away, fill up your glass and fill up anyway. So that year, so that year the Rebbe went to him, and if you remember, and he told him to wipe, like he said, like this. My father Taka tried, and he took off his sweat, and a few minutes later, the Rebbe put his hand in his pocket, and he took out the handkerchief, and he threw it to my father. And he told my father to wipe his forehead. Everybody around him, my father said this to me face to face. Everyone around him said, Vav Tzarik, give it back. It's the Rebbe's, give it back. He said, nothing doing, this is mine. And he put it into his pockets, and he came home, and he put it up on the dresser. Every time I come into the house now, I go to that corner. He put it on top of the dresser. And the next week we had a simcha or something, and the brothers were sitting around, and Shalom says, Ich bin der Bechor. After 120, this is going to be my handkerchief. And Yossi said this, and I said this, and my father said clearly, this handkerchief is going with me. Whenever I go, it will go with me. And Kahava, it's not that I want to talk verbally, sad things, but it's also good things. The handkerchief is actually spread out on his face, because that Vav Iyar, he passed away, and the handkerchief went with him. And we always take it in our family that was a validation. That was a validation from the Rebbe to a chassid. But the emes is, and with this I will close, the emes is we don't need validation, because if we weren't chassidim, and if we weren't Lubavitchers, and if we weren't instilled with everything that the Rebbe instilled in us, we would be nothing. We would be nothing. So yes, we have to thank the Rebbe for Simchas Torah, but we also have to thank the Rebbe for being chassidim. And within the world of chassidim, this was the prime day. This was the State of the Union. This was the day of inauguration. This was the day that gave us chayas.